Hello, to get everything started, we would like to thank you for joining us today. And for anyone who will be jumping on a little late, we will have this session recorded and available to refer to any details that were missed. So to jump into things, my name's Allison Paia. I'm the office manager here at Parent Teacher Home Visits and one of the hosts of today's session. We will be moving around to the rest of our team for introductions, but first I want to let you know some of the things you'll be getting out of today's session. As we join today to prepare for September's PTHV week, we hope that you will come away with tools to help you assess your current interest in plans for PTHV week, to learn effective communication strategies and tools for promoting it, to explore data collection and evaluation tools to assess your local impact, and reminders of key milestones and deadlines to keep in mind leading up to PTHV week. We would also like to note that today is jam-packed. It's a very jam-packed session with lots of information being shared. So we'd like to encourage you to pull from the recommendations and resources that make the most sense for your local needs. With all of the information being shared today, we'd like to remind you that there will be some virtual office hours offered, and that information will be shared later on in today's presentation. And that will be to offer some deeper guidance. And then as well as that, we will again have this session recorded and offered out to for anyone to refer back to. So to move things along, we'd like to introduce you to our team of experts in planning, starting with our communications director, DeQuendra.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. I am DeQuendra Neely Bertrand, Communications Director here at PTHV. Welcome, welcome. Should I pop choreo or?
Please do.
How about my colleague, Rachel?
Thanks, DeQuendra. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It is so great to see you this afternoon. My name is Rachel Bryce, and I'm the Program Director for Parent Teacher Home Visits. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop it on over to Gina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gina Martinez-Ketty. I'm the Executive Director of Parent Teacher Home Visits, and so excited to have you join us today. I am going to pop it over to our final presenter today from Denver Public Schools, Trevin Brandhorst.
Hi, y'all. I'm Trevin Brandhorst. I am the Senior Manager of Family Empowerment and Academic Partnerships with Denver Public Schools, and that's the team where we do Parent Teacher Home Visit. I'm excited to be here and share.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to move things along over to housekeeping, and so we would like to ask everyone to type your name and organization and role into the chat box. We also would love for you to engage by posting any questions throughout the presentation that you have into the chat box. And we also ask that you share on social media using our Twitter handle at PTHVP and our hashtags PTHV Week and PTHV Turns 25. So moving along to our agenda, as mentioned earlier, we are going to cover a plethora of information today, going over communication strategies, evaluation tools, and your next steps in preparing for Parent Teacher Home Visits Week in September. All right, so I am going to hand things over to DeQuendra.
Thank you so much, Allison. And again, let me welcome everyone. We are diving today into the world of communications. I'm DeQuendra Bertrand, Communications Director. Everybody here calls me DQ. I think that's simpler for everybody. So if you want to ask some questions later on, feel free to call me that too. So again, we are taking a little bit of a dive into the world of communications. We're going to share a number of strategies and tools that you can use to promote your PTHV week. So I'm delighted that that work excites you and that you are here to learn a little bit more about it. Now, I should say here at the start that again, we're sharing ideas, a menu of items that you can choose from, and we're here to help you understand how to be as strategic as possible with your outreach so that the work that you do around PTHV week, as well as your home visit practice, can be accessible to all of your audiences. But we recognize this is challenging work. And it's kind of tough to be, both a family engagement expert as well as a communications expert. So I'm going to advise you before we kick things off that please use all of the resources at your disposal. And that especially includes your school or district's communications office. Perhaps it's called your public information office, your outreach office. They will, I'm sure, be happy to support your efforts as well. But shall we dive in? Let's go to our next slide, please. I also want to share an exciting new resource that we have made available to support your promotional activities. The link for our new communications playbook, an A to Z resource for promoting PTHV week, should be in the chat shortly. But it is a much deeper dive into the communication strategies and tactics that we'll be sharing today. I am encouraging you to download this resource as well as share it with all of the team members who will play a role in hosting your PTHV week in your school community. Next slide, please. All righty. Here's where the work begins. So a communications plan is going to be at the heart of promoting your PTHV week activities. And a good communications plan is going to help you build an excitement and anticipation around PTHV week. And it'll help you and your team engage with all of your audiences before, during, and after your events. We think it's important because it keeps everybody on the same page and acting on one accord, and it helps you avoid some of the common hiccups that are well known in event planning. But most importantly, it will point the way toward all of the strategies and tactics that you will need to sustain your practice and promote PTHV week. So I'm going to briefly walk you through some of the most critical elements of a communications plan. We want these steps to be top of mind for you as you begin your work. But by the end of today, our hope is that you'll be equipped to draft perhaps a one-page communications plan and start working with your team to get it executed. So we're going to start with goals. Goals are the central element of a communications plan. You want to begin with the end in mind. Where do you want to wind up? What do you want to have accomplished by the end of PTHV week? What do you want this communications plan to achieve? You want to ensure that, well, let's just say a really good communications goal for PTHV week might be something like, you want to increase awareness of your school's home visit practice among kindergarten families, and you want to increase their participation by 10% within 3 months. This is what we call a SMART goal because it is specific, it is measurable, it's achievable, it's relevant, and it's time bound. So you want to ensure that all of the goals that you include in your PTHV week communications plan follow that standard. One of the another critical element of your communications plan is a set of messages. You will want to create a set of core or key talking points. These are helpful because they're going to appear in every bit of communication that you send out into the world, whether it's a social media post, whether it's your school newsletter, a press release. Some key talking points about PTHV is included in that playbook that we shared with you. But we want you to be mindful that you should tweak those messages to your individual context. You'll want to also tailor them for specific audiences. So for example, continuing with our example of working or reaching out to kindergarten families, your messages should strike a positive and optimistic tone to orient families to what your PTHV week practice is all about. But perhaps your goals might also be persuading local decision makers like your school board to allocate more resources for your PTHV practice. In that case, you need another set of talking points. Your school board is going to want to hear something similar to what those kindergarten families hear, but they will be much more concerned with evidence base. They'll be concerned with the cost benefits as well for your parent-teacher home visit practices. So again, a core set of talking points that are dedicated to each audience that you want to reach is a critical element of your communications plan. And also within that communications playbook that we shared is a nice little messaging checklist that'll help you craft your messages carefully. In a moment, on the next several slides, we're going to walk through some strategies and tactics that you'll be able to use. Suffice it to say here that strategies and tactics are the what and how you will do things. So for example, you may want to build out a media strategy, right? So a media strategy is important because it is third-party validation of all of the work that you are doing, and it gets the word out to as many people as possible. But how do you get it? How do you do it? Some tactics might include, sending out a press release or hosting a media briefing. And we'll talk about some of those in a moment. No plan is complete without some way of measuring whether your work is effective. So I want to put a plug in here for evaluation of your communications efforts as well. And I know I've given you a lot, but we want to bring it to life a little bit. So before we move to the next slide, I want to bring on Trevin Brandhorst of Denver Public Schools. Really fun fact, real quick. The National PTHV week that we're all planning together is modeled after the pioneering efforts of Denver Public Schools, which have been spearheaded by Trevin for a number of years. And if you didn't see our first orientation session, I strongly urge you to go to our website and view it. Trevin shared so much wisdom, so much insight from Denver's PTHV week, and he is back here today to talk to us about communications too. So we are honored to have you, Trevin. Would you share with us, how your team works on communication, how it works with your communications department at Denver Public Schools for the promotion of PTHV week?
Yeah, so thank you very much, DeQuendra. I had the opportunity to speak in the first workshop, and I'm glad that you all thought it was wisdom. And so just appreciate the opportunity to be back today to share some of the great things that Denver is doing. Having PTHV for so long, we've been able to integrate a lot of what we do into the large systems and departments and structures that we already have existing. And so as you said earlier, it's really leveraging the expertise that you have available to you when you have that available. Not everybody has a super robust comms department. And so it's finding sometimes those experts. In Denver, we're very lucky to have a pretty strong comms department and a pretty good relationship with those individuals, so that we can really leverage them for their expertise in the communication and working with media space. And we can focus on what we're good at, which is family and community engagement and working with our families and making sure, our educators and folks know about the great opportunities they have available to them and can leverage every single day. And so I think for us, it's really just working within those systems, figuring out what exists so that we can use that. And then what doesn't exist there, work with those experts to see what are the spaces we can get into, or what are the things that we can create so that we have that reach, or we have that communication strategy as a tool in the future.
Excellent, excellent advice. Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to you in a few minutes because I know you have so much more to share. But shall we move to our next slide so that we can take a really short walk through some strategies and tactics. So thank you, Ali. On this slide, and for the next couple slides, we're going to talk through some things that you might be able to do to promote your PTHV week. And we would be remiss if we didn't start with um, saying that one of the most impactful things you can do during PTHV week is to conduct as many home visits as possible. And you may want to add some impact by inviting key decision makers to go on your visits with your team. This accomplishes a few things. These leaders will understand the power of home visits and will be able to do that work. That's part of your goal of perhaps being able to allocate more resources to the practice in the future. But these are also incredibly powerful media opportunities as well. Because there's such a high kind of like visual value, when a superintendent, for example, or a local community leader goes on a home visit, the likelihood of your being able to secure the coverage by broadcast media is really high. So be sure to try and work that as much as possible, but be sure to clear this with the families before your visits, of course. Shall we move to our next slide? Well, I will say no communications plan is complete without a media strategy, as I mentioned before. So a good media relations program is critical to your communications plan because of the impact that the media can have on shaping public opinion. If your community is like most, you've experienced local issues that have generated a lot of press, and that press has turned into some kind of word of mouth marketing or word of mouth, a lot of talk about what's going on in your schools. Whether positive or negative. But when people read a positive story about parent-teacher home visits, they're more likely to have a favorable opinion of your initiative, and that support goes a long way toward reaching the goals that you may have identified in your communications plan. Now here I have made, a list of some tactics that you might be able to carry out as part of your media strategy. This is but a few. Again, the playbook lists several ideas for some things that you might be able to do to promote your PTHV week with regard to your media strategy, but I'll walk through these really quickly. Something I think everybody can do: newspapers, radio stations, TV stations, local blogs, and possibly other outlets in your community likely have something called a community calendar or something to that effect, where you may list your PTHV week activities. Make good use of these. This gets the word out, and it puts those activities in front of eyes that may be important toward reaching your communications goals. Let me give particular play to radio promotion, because most radio stations have some community-oriented segments where you might be able to even go on the air and briefly speak about what parent-teacher home visits are, and what your school community is going to do to celebrate PTHV week. Simply call up the radio station, ask for a program manager, or they may just have a general manager, and inquire whether you can get on their schedule in the near future. It's really that simple, and anyone can do it. You want to be prepared to justify, why this is important and how this can fit in their schedule. But many local news and cable news also have similar features. You can call them up as well. You ask for the assignment desk and you make your case about PTHV week, as well as the power of parent-teacher home visits. The next three strategies, again, are tactics that you can use to generate media coverage. A media advisory is simply a notice that you send to media to alert them about an upcoming event. It's a tool of the trade. There's a sample media advisory in the playbook, but generally it's a short document. You can email it. It tells them the who, the what, the where, and the when of your PTHV week event. You want to send this out about a week in advance. perhaps two, before any public events that you host for PTHV week. This will give them time to assign people to cover the story and help you connect with those folks as well. A press release is another tactic to get media coverage and to get noticed by your target audiences. Again, because we want to be sure you are very well equipped. A sample press release is included in the playbook, but some good ideas to send a press release might be to share how many visits took place during PTHV week. You might be using a press release to announce that local decision makers or policymakers, such as your superintendent or community members, have participated in home visits. Or you can use the press release to generally describe any major PTHV week event that takes place in your community. And if you can swing it, I highly recommend a press briefing. It's tough to get media out to anything because of the nature of the work, but a press briefing can be done virtually, it can be done in person, it could be even done over the phone. And it's simply a meeting. It's a meeting that you call together to inform the press about something. It's a tool of the trade. We use a lot of jargon, but we're democratizing communications and public relations today. This is an accessible tool to you. You can call the media up, multiple media folks, to give them an opportunity to learn about PTHV week and your PTHV practice. It might be a good idea to call together a press briefing to inform the media that your school has adopted this practice as part of your family engagement strategy. It could even be, we know that some schools are using more engaged family engagement practices as part of COVID recovery. So that could be your hook, if you will, for a press briefing. However this fits within your particular context, use that as your hook to draw the media in. And it needn't be more than a half hour or so, but it starts with a brief introduction about your newsworthy matter. And then it allows an opportunity for the media who come to ask you questions. And I want to end here and on the media strategy piece by just saying, remember that your media strategy is accomplishing a few things. It's getting attention for your practice, but it's also building relationships. And that's what we're all about, right? It's building relationships with reporters who will come back to you again for stories in the future. And they can be resources to you as well to continue to share the good news about your family engagement strategies. So let me pause again now before we move on to social media campaigns. I want to bring Trevin in again to come in and share your team's media experience. How do you prepare your team, Trevin, to work with media to support your PTHV week?
Thanks again, Dequindra. I think, for me, a lot of times it's making sure to look at this as a multifaceted approach. I think media is our external method to get this out there, and it's really important not to forget all of those great internal channels that you have available to yourself as well, to make sure that the internal folks who are busy and going through so many things get that same great information. I think a lot of times our prepping for working with the media starts with the training and the certification. It starts with honoring the integrity of the program, the core values, and the best practices, and making sure that that fidelity is happening across your district. And for us, it's a large district. And so that's something that we're always working on. We continue to have an eye on and are looking at how we strengthen there so that everybody is talking about this program from that same lens and having that very clear understanding of what PTHV and home visits are and what they're not, because that's really crucial to going into it with the right mentality. Then when we actually get to the media, it's again, leveraging our comms department, leveraging those folks who have those relationships with our media, because they are the ones who get to bring them out to those events. As you mentioned, it is really hard to get them out to cover something. And so having those relationships is really critical. I think it's also really important to bring in diverse stakeholders and making sure that they have an opportunity to engage in the amazing work, again, so that they can speak to it, they can see it in action, and then really letting them use their channels, their avenues to be advocates, engagers, movers and shakers, and more for this great work. And so the media is just one part of that. And I think it's really getting those other individuals in the position that they can work with the media, they can talk with the media, they can be those folks that people see in the community, that they can be like, aha, the board member was just on the news and they were just saying this. So it gets outside of those interactions where you're setting up something specifically, and then you're having those advocates talk about you in those other spaces where they have the media's captive attention. So all that to say, it takes a lot, but again, leveraging the people who know the different ways to go about this will help kind of put you in the right direction and make it seem a lot less overwhelming.
Absolutely. Here. I couldn't agree more. And, just remember that, these media interviews are conversations with people. And we want to bring them within the realm of possibility for everybody. And so please do consider creating a media strategy as part of your PTHV week. Thank you, Trevin. Awesome insights. Moving on to the next slide, although it's geared toward social media, I really want you to think in terms of multimedia outreach when you promote your PTHV week activities. Of course, social media is a strong pillar of that, but you want to use all the tools at your disposal. You want to use them to share compelling examples and illustrations of what parent-teacher home visits are all about. These are graphics, these are videos, these are stories, and they need to be in front of all of your audiences. They need to be everywhere your audiences are. That's in the hallways of your schools. That's outside the main office. That's in community centers. That's, maybe on a bulletin board at City Hall. That's in your local coffee shop. Everybody that you want to reach and create a positive impression of parent-teacher home visits, you need to put these artifacts in front of them, if you will. So consider doing things like placing a PTHV week banner on your school's homepage. Place a notice on your school's internal communications vehicle, whether that's an intranet or internal website. Place a story in your school's newsletter. But above all, you want to create a steady drumbeat of messages and materials that will go out to all of your audiences, and ask people to share all of these things. The communication playbook offers some visual inspiration for some of the multimedia work. And in a moment, you'll see in the chat, if it's not already there, we've created a Google Drive that's full of sample posts and flyers and banners and video materials that you can use as part of your multimedia outreach. So place your logo on them, tweak them to fit your local context, but there are a number of materials in there that you might be able to use for that purpose. So let's move on to our next slide. And now for the secret sauce in all of our communications work. You want to release the mavens. These are the well-connected, very influential people in your communications. You want to enlist their support early and often. These people are going to be your brand ambassadors for PTHV week. I call them mavens. They go by many, many names, but they are just well-connected people because they know a lot of people and are influential. And every school community has a group of people. They may be gadflies or they may be your biggest supporters, but you want to bring all of these folks into the fold to help support your PTHV week promo efforts. So you want them to share your messages, you want them to promote your events, and you want them to share your practice with their rich network of friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. So before the start of the new year, make a list of the people who are known to your school community to have big networks and to be very influential, and share all of your materials with them and ask them to share it. This is, in its essence, word of mouth marketing. And it is essential to carrying out promotion of your PTHV week activities, and it works. In fact, it's often said that word of mouth marketing is the most valuable and most effective form of marketing there is. So we place a high premium on this activity. I don't want to give it the short shrift. It is very, very important to your efforts. And because of how valuable it is, we want to make sure that you acknowledge the efforts of this group of people and publicly thank them during your PTHV week. So shall we move to our next slide, please? Now, here's the case for evaluating your communications work. In a minute, you'll hear from my colleague, Rachel, about evaluating your overall PTHV week efforts, but all plans need evaluation, and communications is no different. So don't wait until the end to determine whether you've been successful. Continuously monitor your work and determine whether you are reaching your targets. You might, for example, want to look at the number of people who sign up and express interest in PTHV week. You may want to count registration or attendance at events. You want to look at how well your social media posts are performing. You want to look at how many people are visiting your websites and blogs, or how many stories were placed in the media as a result of your efforts. There are innumerable ways to determine how well your communications plan was, but to be strategic, those metrics must be aligned to the goals that we started out with. Okay, so don't neglect that. Again, there is much more guidance in the communications playbook on this matter, but to bring us home, I want to turn to Trevin one more time because Trevin, in this short time, we've shared quite a bit, and I hope we haven't overwhelmed folks, but I know you've got a lot to share, and I'm wondering if you could maybe bring us home with just your top tips for promoting PTHV week. How does it work? What works well in Denver, I should say.
Sure. I'll keep it short and sweet for you. And I put my email in the chat earlier. So if anybody ever has questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat. But I think really what it comes down to are what I say is, be a hype person for this work. Make sure that you're giving that excitement. And then celebrate those who are doing it. It's the perfect opportunity to really make sure people get to see the faces of the folks and the champions of this great work. And then the really, honestly, the biggest thing is do it often. Be consistent. When you create these systems and you do them often, it starts to become habits. It starts to become just a part of the process, and people get used to it. And so then it's not, pulling teeth to ask someone to do an interview. It's not, the world's hardest thing to ask them to come into this space for you when you're doing these things consistently.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Trevin. And I know you're going to stay with us because you've still got so many examples to share. And this is so valuable to our folks. So I do encourage folks to reach out to Trevin because he's a pro at this. He's been doing this for quite some time. But I will share here. Here are links to the resources that I've been talking about all along. Just want to make sure you get your eyes on those links one more time to be able to download and share those materials with your team. And please, if I may be of service as well, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But to keep things rolling along, I am now going to hand things over to my colleague, Rachel. Over to you.
Hey, thank you, DeQuendra, Trevin, for that deep dive into communications. I know that many of you have started planning your PTHV week observance. And I want to leave you with a saying to think about, because it has important implications for your work. And that is, you must inspect what you expect. Now, evaluation is often an afterthought in the planning process, but I really do encourage you to consider how you're going to go about assessing both the implementation and the impact of your PTHV week celebration. Just like communications, if you have the experts on hand in your district, engage them. But if not, don't stress about it. We have some guidance and some resources that we have created that are very usable for the layperson in mind. So let's go ahead and let's kind of dive in now into the next slide about why evaluation is so important. If you use evaluation with intention, it can be one of the most powerful tools that you as a leader in this work can really use to strengthen and sustain and grow your home visit practice. And perhaps even most importantly, improve the outcomes for your students and their families and your educators. Now, we recommend that evaluation is a part of everyone's home visit practice, but it is something that we are setting as an expectation for participation in PTHV week. And that's because it offers just so many advantages to you. First of all, it's going to allow you to see and hear the impact of your PTHV week celebration. There's going to be some stories that emerge that really help ground you in your why, and it really reveals some important aspects of the work. Evaluation also allows us to answer questions about the effectiveness of different PTHV week activities and elements. What worked, what didn't, why? And then you can use that information to then inform improvements to future PTHV week celebrations. But lastly, evaluation is really just this wonderful opportunity to celebrate all of your efforts and to showcase the benefits for your students and educators. All too often in the education field, we just put our head down and we get it done, right? And we don't kind of hit pause and we don't kind of share out the great work that we're doing. And we hope that PTHV week is an opportunity to kind of change that. So I just kind of want to remind everyone that program evaluation, even though it can be intimidating to some, it doesn't have to be super complex in order to be valuable. Simple evaluation plans, when they're executed well, can offer you some real benefits. And it's something that we all have the capacity to do. So let's go ahead and look at the next slide to dive into some of those fundamentals or basics as you think about your evaluation plan. Now, at the absolute minimum, we want you to collect some quantitative data. And now quantitative data are those quantifiable or measurable data points. And in its simplest form, those are those home visit counts, including how many schools and how many educators participated. We encourage you to use the systems that you already have in place and that your educators are familiar with using. Sometimes that might be an electronic or a paper home visit log. Others have created home visit entry fields that are linked to or tied directly to students within their student information systems. But whatever option you choose, we do encourage you to make sure that you can isolate and analyze data directly from that PTHV week timeframe. Now, some other quantitative data that you might want to collect include surveys. Surveys are helpful because they're fast, they're inexpensive, and they kind of provide those general themes about how people are experiencing PTHV week. But surveys do have some limitations, and you might want to also think about incorporating some qualitative methodologies, such as empathetic interviews or focus groups. Now, not only do interviews and focus groups provide that deeper level of understanding of people's experiences and their perspectives, it's also an opportunity to really surface those stories of impact that you can then kind of share out. It also allows you to identify potential advocates and leaders for this work, particularly amongst the parent ranks. And of course, you know, the power of listening is it allows you to continue to build support and relationships. So those are two important considerations for your evaluation plan, but there's other things you can do as well. For instance, you might want to collect some other artifacts or evidence from your PTHV week efforts. Perhaps it's, collecting news stories that highlight your PTHV week, or maybe it's a proclamation from your school board, or however else you plan to celebrate. So those are just some ideas of the types of data that you can collect to evaluate your PTHV week. But I want to hit pause here and invite Trevin again to share with us some details about Denver Public Schools' approach to evaluation. Trevin, can you share with us what you have done in the past, as well as any new evaluation plans that you are looking to incorporate for this upcoming PTHV week?
Yeah, so, as I said earlier, I think, again, it's leveraging the experts in these spaces who understand and work with these large and sometimes complex systems, which capture a lot of our data, because ultimately they're the ones who know how to make those systems speak to each other. And that's really important because we like to spend a lot of our time focused on making the visits happen and not necessarily the paperwork. We all know that compliance and paperwork is super, super important. And so for us, it has been, in the past, working with our analysis, research, and development department within the district to have them analyzing our data to show us the things that are statistically significant, to make sure that we're able to really talk about and highlight those spaces. A lot of that has been in that space of, data points, things like that. In addition to that, our goal has been to continue to increase the number of those pieces of data which really show the story, really, in my opinion, pull at the heartstrings and give people an idea as to why this work is so impactful and effective. And so a lot of times what it's come down to with evaluation is, how do we make sure that this is working? How do we make sure that we're increasing the number of educators who are having this available in their toolkit to use as they're going about their school years? And then how do we improve the processes to always kind of refine? Again, we got to try to take away from the paperwork when possible, so that we can, on the back end, look at all that data that's important, but kind of take those pieces that overwhelm a lot of our educators and kind of maybe sometimes push them away from being able to do this effectively.
Thank you, Trevin, for kind of those reminders that first and foremost, this is a celebration and we should have fun with it, but also the importance of collaboration, particularly when it comes to the planning process. Now, on that note, let's go ahead, let's talk about some of the resources that your planning team can use when you think about collecting data. First of all, I invite you to explore our PTHV Week webpage. We're sharing a link to that in the chat box again. Again, this is a repository of all of our PTHV Week tools and resources. And then we're going to be kind of continuously adding to there is just so much stuff there that will be a benefit to you. But one of those tools is also our PTHV Week evaluation toolkit. We're dropping a link to that toolkit in the chat box now. This is a downloadable resource that provides a much more robust description of the different data collection methods that you can use. We also have sample tools like a home visit log, sample surveys, and interview question guides. This toolkit also provides some guidance on how you can actually go about sharing out the results, which we're going to talk about now on the next slide. So, yes, evaluation, there is some work involved in collecting and analyzing your data. And that is why it is so important that you don't just collect it and then set it and file it away. You want to use it to your advantage. Now, sharing your results is a great strategy for communicating the value of your home visit practice. And if you're intentional about it, like Denver has been, it's also a great strategy for securing additional funding and support for your home visit practice, as well as influencing family engagement policy and practice decisions at the local level. Now, to do a great job with sharing out your results, there's a couple things you need to remember. First, you want to create a dissemination plan that is tailored to your target audiences. We really recommend that you make sure that you use clear and concise language, but you also want to use data visualization in a really effective way. a lot of people love a good infographic, right? And so we did create a template to an infographic that is very much plug and play, that you can take your PTHV week data and enter into and then share out. But there's just a plethora of ways you can share out those stories of impact, no matter what method you use. And I did see, for instance, our friend Christina in Connecticut, like she's going to be sharing out about parent-teacher home visit in an upcoming event. When those things happen, reach out to our office, please, and collaborate with us, because we can leverage our network and our resources to really amplify your story and your message. We're here to kind of help promote. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pivot back to Trevin once again, just to kind of ask him to share out like some of the ways that they have intentionally shared the results of their PTHV week and kind of what they're seeing as a benefit of that strategy.
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, with being a hype person for this work, the data has really allowed us to celebrate the amazing work that our educators are committing to with taking the time for these practices. And so for us, it's really just been refining those systems so that we always have that data available to us when folks are asking. We always have those examples and can highlight what's going on, showcase the number of visits that schools are doing, and really help kind of excite them about this. Because I think a lot of times, it's really just aiming to show them that this is an opportunity where we want to pay them for their time. We're not asking them to do something else extra. And then using that data to show that, and then working on refining our processes and systems so that they know we want their time spent on the visits and not the paperwork necessarily. So ultimately, I think it just really helps make a lot of this work easier for us to showcase. And then that in turn makes it a lot easier for us to create that buy-in, whether that's from district leaders or school leaders who want to bring that to their school, or whether that's parents who didn't know that was an opportunity that they could ask for. For us, it's leveraging all of those to paint the picture of what this program is and what's really possible through the relationships that you can develop by being intentional and creating this space.
Thanks, Trevin, for that fantastic insight. I'm going to just touch on some, it's not always the fun stuff, but it's the necessary stuff, and that is also sharing your data with parent-teacher home visits and your results. And the reason we are asking you to not just share with your stakeholders, but to share with us as well, is so that we can collect national level data, and that we can then analyze it to see what the collective impact of all of our shared efforts has been, as well as kind of assess our progress on our national goals. Of course, we're also going to be using that information to identify winners for our PTHV week contest. So how you actually share that data with us is outlined step-by-step in the evaluation toolkit. I do want to say that we tried to be very mindful of the time constraints that you all are facing when we kind of created the procedures. So assuming you have seamless data collection processes and you've already aggregated your data, the actual reporting to our office, which will be through an electronic form, should be relatively straightforward and quick. At the very bare minimum of those like home visit counts, that will take well under 30 minutes for people to complete. If you have a more robust evaluation, including those extra artifacts and qualitative data, it might take 30 to 60 minutes, depending on what kind of data and how much data you are sharing with us. I also do want to let you know that we are intentionally aligning the data reporting process for PTHV week to our annual home visit tallies that we ask you to share every year as well. So instead of two different forms that are collected within that same time frame, we've consolidated it into one form that will be submitted in the weeks following PTHV week. Again, we'll be communicating often about those procedures in order to help you prepare. And we're also, as Allison shared at the very start of this, we'll also be sharing office hours and some other resources to just make sure your questions are always answered and that you have the support that you need. Now we're going to be wrapping up, and we're going to share some final reminders. But before we do that, I want to invite Trevin just to share like 30 seconds. What is one thing that you want our leaders on this call today to remember as they're planning their PTHV week celebration?
Have fun with it. I think, our data shows once we enacted PTHV week, we nearly tripled the number of schools we had participating in the program. We went from about 50 schools to 134. So it just shows how impactful it can be when you have the data, when you have the strategies to communicate it effectively, and you have the people around you supporting you. PTHV week is camaraderie, it's friendly competition, and it's showcasing the great work. And I think when you're having fun with that, those pieces happen naturally. And so just challenge you in these challenging times to try to find the light, the levity, the creativity, the fun. And again, email is in the chat. Feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, Trevin. I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Gina now to start wrapping things up for us. Gina?
Thanks, Rachel, and thanks everybody for that great information. We do want to carve out just a couple of minutes for any burning questions that you have. And I also want you to know that we are always going to be available to you for questions between now and Parent-Teacher Home Visit Week. So let's see if anybody has any questions. Feel free to raise your hand using the reactions button. You can put it in the chat box, or you can simply unmute yourself. It says Angela, but I think that's Marguerite.
You're correct, Gina. Thank you. It is Marguerite. So I did post my question in the box as Trevin was going through and talking about PTHV week. I'm wondering if Denver only does one time a year, or is it ongoing with a major focus at the beginning of the year? And wondering other folk in the room if they do a one time of year specialty area, but then maybe they're doing home visits throughout the year, just thinking about their cycle.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I answered in there a little bit on the direct message, but our model is a 2-visit program model. And so we really ramp up at the start of the school year or right in the late summer to get people excited about that first. We have 2 PTHV weeks. We have a fall and a spring PTHV week. So we leverage the fall one to kind of get the excitement for the beginning of the year. We've got the spring week as a reminder of, hey, if you haven't yet had your second visit, now is a great chance to do so before the year wraps up. But we have recently been talking about also, there's an opportunity during summer where there's some of that summer programming and it's shorter. Is there an opportunity where we can do a 1-visit kind of model to get more of those visits happening in some of those other spaces as well? So I think we're pretty flexible in it, but our goal is to always push for 2 visits.
Thank you, Trevin. And thank you, Marguerite, for the question. I see Rochelle has a question in the chat box about, are there templates available for promoting PTHV week on social media? And the answer is yes. So DeQuendra has created some beautiful images and logos that are available to you to use. I think there's a link earlier in the chat box today, and there it is again that DeQuendra just posted. So feel free to go there and use the materials there. For the sake of time, I am going to move us forward and just want to remind you that we will be available for questions, and we will have an FAQ page on our website as well. So I'm going to highlight some of the key dates to look forward to as we move forward. The first one is May 12th. That is going to be the first of our virtual office hour sessions, which will be held every other week. Rachel will be hosting those sessions, and it'll be an opportunity for you to just join informally on an as-needed basis to ask questions, thought partner with her, troubleshoot with her, and you might be joined by other communities across the country as well who are planning their parent-teacher home visit week celebration as well. So that'll start on April 12th. In order to get the Zoom link, you will need to register, and that registration link has been dropped in the chat box. So you might just want to register for that right away, and that way you'll know that you have that Zoom link when and if you need to drop in on those office hours. Another date is May 18th. It is the last day to apply for the mini grant, the mini grants that we are offering. I'll say more about that in a minute. August 3rd is going to be our final preparation session before, of course, Parent-Teacher Home Visit Week, September 19th through 24th. Cannot wait to see how all of that plays out. I'm sure it's going to be great. And then the final date to keep in mind is November 2nd, where we will be coming back together after Parent-Teacher Home Visits Week to celebrate all the great work you will have done, and also to announce the awards of our friendly competition. So let's go to the next slide and look at some next steps that you might consider after today. So the first next step is to make sure to register for session 3. So again, you might want to do that before summer hits. That link is in the chat box, so please do register for our final prep session. Also, please make sure that you have one person that is responsible for registering your school district for Parent-Teacher Home Visit Week itself. Okay, so we want to make sure that all participating districts are actually registered for PTHV Week, and that link to register is in the chat box as well. If you're participating as a solo school, you can also register your school. The other thing in terms of next steps, and I do want to say that we do have a planning checklist that has been dropped in the chat box that has a lot more details to help you in your planning process. But please do engage your local team and brainstorm, imagine, be creative about what you want your Parent-Teacher Home Visit Week to look like. And then, of course, the step after that is to take all that creativity and turn it into an actionable plan that includes all the who's, the what's, the when's, and the where's of how you're going to celebrate and evaluate. Another next step is to, again, make sure you apply for the PTHV Week mini grant. That deadline is May 18th. It's a very simple application, so it won't take a lot of time, but you do need to set aside some time to prepare it and submit it by May 18th. Those funds are really designed to be used for pretty much anything to help you promote your PTHV Week, especially those things that sometimes those title dollars don't allow you to spend on. So if you want to buy pizzas or t-shirts or sandwiches, these are the funds you can use to do any of that. The other thing on the mini grants is if you have trouble accessing any of those documents, please reach out to us because we want to make sure you have access to those documents, and we will get them to you in a form that you can use. The last next step is to make sure to create that communications plan and begin to implement all of the strategies and tactics that you are going to develop and motivate people, excite people, and share your story widely. All right, let's wrap up with the next slide. Please do stay connected with us. You see our social media. We'll be posting about this. You see Rachel's email on the final slide here. Please feel free to reach out to her with any questions along the way. And of course, she will be available in virtual office hours starting on May 12th. The last thing I want to say is thank you so much for being here today, for helping us celebrate our 25th anniversary. And most importantly, thank you so much for your commitment to building trusting relationships between families and educators. That is it for us today. Thank you again for being here, and have a great rest of the day.